Lincoln was elected to unite a country and stop slavery. Democrats smeared him, went to war against him, assassinated him. Now their target is Trump.
America was never good! Slavery, genocide, and war!
Donald Trump wins the presidency. So help me God.
They say he's killing America.
There will be a vote to impeach.
They say he's a racist.
This was a white lash.
And a fascist. Who are the real racists?
Northern Democrats had conspired together with Southern Democrats to take away the fruit of other people's labor.
Who are the real fascists?
Both Mussolini and Hitler set up and ran welfare states.
This is done by the do-gooders, the liberals, the people who wanted to improve society.
Which party attacks our free speech?
How dare you speak against the Führer?
Our religious liberty and our personal safety. A nation dies when its people are not free. We too must fight for freedom, regardless of the price we pay.
An end in terror is preferable to a terror with no end.
The stakes could not be higher. We're talking about America, the greatest nation on earth. Lincoln saved America for the first time. It's now up to us to save America a second time.
All right, The Death of a Nation by Dinesh D Souza, and he is with us now. Dinesh, great to have you with us again, sir.
Thanks. Good to be on the show.
I know. It's always good to have you on, and I got to tell you, watching this trailer was very riveting, some of the analogies that you're making. But I want to get to, what was the vision, your vision of this film? What inspired it?
Well, the first thing that inspired it was I was thinking to myself the kind of craziness that has surrounded Trump since his election. You know, the screaming accusations of racism and fascism, the effort to eject him from office, you know, by any means necessary. I thought to myself, I haven't seen this kind of stuff in my adult lifetime. So has it ever occurred before? Is our situation totally unprecedented? And then I remembered that, no, it's not. In 1860, an outsider, Lincoln, a Republican, was elected in a very close election, and all hell broke loose. And the rival party, which happened to be the Democratic Party, said, we will not accept this. The Northern Democrats, some of them were calling for Lincoln to be assassinated. The Southern Democrats said, we're willing to break up the country rather than live with Lincoln's presidency. And so I thought that is actually the correct historical analogy in trying to think about what's going on in America now.
So when you try to compare Trump to Lincoln, obviously Abe Lincoln was absolutely determined to keep the country together. A lot of people, though, criticize the president and saying that he's divisive and tears people apart by a lot of his rhetoric, whether it be Charlottesville or something else. So how do you, Dinesh, bridge that gap?
Well, I think that the error here is to think that Trump is the source of the division when he's actually the product of it. And what I mean by that is that I think American politics became somewhat gangsterized, if I can use that term, under Obama and Hillary. The use of the weapons of the state against political opponents, the rise of political violence in the form of these groups like Antifa and so on. So all of this was going on. And I think the rank-and-file Republicans said, look, in this kind of environment, it doesn't make sense for us to nominate a Romney or a McCain. These are sort of Boy Scouts, and they're good guys, but the left knows how to deal with them. And so we need a tough guy. And so I see Trump as a kind of response to stuff that had been happening in America previously. Now, in Lincoln's case, the same. I mean, American politics in the 1840s and 50s was getting really crazy, and the Democrats in the South were demanding not only that you leave slavery alone in the South, but they wanted a slave empire that included countries like Cuba and Mexico. They wanted slavery ultimately to be made permanent. They wanted constitutional amendments that protected slavery directly. And so Lincoln was a response to all that craziness. Basically, a whole portion of the country said, we're going to go with the Republicans and we're going to put a stop to all this. And so I think that the analogy with Trump does continue to hold. Now, I'm not saying Trump and Lincoln are similar as men. Lincoln was brooding, philosophical, melancholy. Personality-wise, Trump is quite different. But I am saying that the environment is eerily similar.
So being a student of history, you go back to the 1860 election, Lincoln-Douglas, and everybody remembers the great debates there that he did with Stephen Douglas. What if Douglas had won? What would have been different?
Well, if Douglas would have won, Douglas's philosophy was what he called popular sovereignty. And basically, Douglas held that if states want to have slavery, they can have it. If they don't want to have it, they don't have to have it. And so what Douglas would have done is consolidated a principle of permanence in which you could conceivably have slavery in America now. Why? Because Congress and the court would have no power to restrict states and territories from being able to choose for themselves if they wanted to have slavery, yes or no. And basically what Lincoln said is that's a contradiction. You cannot choose democratically to deprive other people of their freedom. In other words, you cannot use choice to override another man's choice. So he exposed the kind of hypocrisy and contradiction, at the heart of Douglas's philosophy. So it's very good for the country that Douglas didn't win, even though the country went through a tremendous trauma. And Lincoln was very tough during that time because a lot of Republicans, these are the sort of the rhinos of 1860, came rushing to Lincoln and said, listen, we have to give up the platform of the Republican Party. The country may break apart and so on. And Lincoln said no. He said, look, we've campaigned on this. The American people have ratified it through an electoral majority. So even though we proposed it, it's not our mandate. It's the mandate of the American people, and it's our job to carry it out. There's no other meaning of democracy other than that we elect representatives to carry out the will of an electoral majority of the people. So Lincoln said, that's what I'm going to do.
Now, during this period, Dinesh, as you know, President Lincoln at the time, he really suspended a lot of basic constitutional rights. I mean, there was a congressman from Ohio, an elected representative, that Lincoln actually had arrested, thrown in jail, and then transported him to the South because he was voicefully opposing what he was saying. So in that period of time, there's a lot of things that President Lincoln did that people don't realize that was above and beyond just operating through the constitutional system that we have. So,
well, I mean, in fairness, Lincoln did say, and I think he's right, that under conditions of war, the situation is different than in conditions of peace. So Lincoln's argument against that congressman, this is Ohio Congressman Vallandigham,
right.
Lincoln said basically, I'm not objecting to his free speech, but what this guy is calling for is for soldiers to desert the Union Army. Mm-hmm. And then Lincoln, essentially in a very memorable line, said something like, must I shoot the simple soldier boy who deserts, while leaving untouched the hand of the wily agitator who induces him to desert. So Lincoln's point was, it's one thing to oppose the war, criticize Lincoln's policies, but when you're actually actively working to undermine the Union Army in a time of desperate struggle, that's going too far. So, one can agree or disagree on civil liberties grounds, but it wasn't that Lincoln believed that under normal circumstances he could do anything like this.
Right. So he felt that particular congressman was borderline treasonous by asking for soldiers to desert because of his opposition to the war. 21 past the hour. We're with Dinesh D Souza. He's the author of the new movie, Death of a Nation. It's opened in 1,000 theaters a week ago on August 3rd. The film likens former President Abraham Lincoln to Donald Trump. And Dinesh says that the situations they found themselves in as U.S. presidents are very similar. Now, let's get to the Mueller investigation. One of the things that you said is during Lincoln's time, there were all kinds of efforts to get Lincoln out of there. Do you view, Dinesh, the Mueller investigation, do you see any analogy at all here?
Well, yes, in the sense that if the Mueller investigation was an isolated case, I would say then we have to look at it perhaps differently. But you have to see it as part of a pattern. And by that I mean right from the moment that Trump was elected, let's convince the electors not to vote for the man that they're pledged to. Let's not attend the inauguration. Let's dispatch thugs to Washington, D.C. to bust up the inaugural parties, destroy property, set fire to things, and so on. Then let's introduce impeachment motions even before Trump has taken office. Then let's investigate Russia, Stormy Daniels, Mueller. So all of this I see as a kind of coordinated attack that is based on the simple notion that this guy unexpectedly beat us, and now we're going to do whatever we can to eject him from there. So Mueller is part of this larger coordinated attack.
So let me just ask you something, and I got asked this the other day on CNN, and I gave my answer, but I really want to get your answer on this. You look at the results that President Trump is having right now on the economy, Dinesh, and it's stunning, right? 4.1% growth, heading to 5%, jobs at an all-time high, unemployment down to 3% right now. Dinesh, we actually have more jobs than we have U.S. applicants for the jobs. We have a record number of ex-prisoners, felons hired, handicapping hired, the lowest unemployment for blacks, Hispanics, women. We could go on and on and on. I mean, it's tremendous result, coupled with the fact we're at peace, no wars. You look at his results, they're fantastic. Why do so many Democrats and the left hate this man to the extent they do? Why?
Well, and let's even deepen that question. Why are so many Republicans? You would think that Trump is almost a kind of, he's a political Moses leading the Republicans to the promised land, winning states that Republicans have not known how to win, at least since Reagan. Right. And yet there's so much sulking and complaining and never Trumping inside the Republican Party. And I think the answer to this is partly Trump's style and temperament, and it's partly the fact that the left is deeply scared of Trump. I mean, they realize that, for example, take the Democratic Party. It relies right now on an ethnic organizational plan in which every minority group is sort of rounded up, made dependent on the Democratic Party, and then the Democrats harvest 90% of their votes. That's the Democratic strategy with black ghettos, Latino barrios, Native American reservations. Mm-hmm. So think of what happens to the Democrats if Trump continues this pattern of getting black unemployment down, of gentrifying the inner city. People suddenly have jobs, crime rates go down. If the Republican Party got 30% of the black vote and 40% of the Hispanic vote, the Democratic Party is basically finished. So I see this as a kind of primal scream on the part of the political left, which actually first they thought Trump was ridiculous, he's a buffoon, but now they're mortally scared of him because they feel that he might break ground that Republicans have actually had no ability to do for at least 3 decades.
Well, during the presidential campaign of 2016, Van Jones on CNN was on his panel one day, and he said, there's one poll that says that Trump could get 10% of the black vote. He says, do you realize if he gets 10% of the black vote that he wins in a landslide? Now, he got 6%, which was higher than any Republican has had since, I guess, the highest black vote, I think, if memory serves me, was Richard Nixon in 68 or 72. I think he got around 30%. That was the highest in some time in our generation. But, I mean, if he could get 15% of the black vote, I mean, it's over, right? It's over.
Well, the Democrats here have they have developed a narrative about the history of the parties that is bogus. And this narrative is that the Republicans might have been the party of emancipation, of opposition to segregation, of shutting down the Ku Klux Klan, but the parties switched sides. And the Republicans today are the racists. This was the significance of all the Charlottesville nonsense, both a year ago and now a little bit again this past weekend. It's the effort to pin the racist and fascist tail on the Republican elephant. So this is now disrupting this narrative has been what my work is all about. And in the movie that's in theaters now, I have an accompanying book, same title, Death of a Nation. What I'm basically showing is that all this talk about the party switching sides, not true. All this talk about the racist Dixiecrats becoming Republicans, you can just count and see it's false. I mean, there were 150 or so racist Dixiecrats. I actually put all their pictures up on the screen, and then I say, how many of them became Republicans? Well, in the Senate, one guy, Strom Thurmond. In the House, one guy, Albert Watson. And all the other 148 racist Dixiecrats lived and died in the Democratic Party. So all this stuff is pushed out there. It's not just Trump. It's being taught in our schools. It's on the History Channel. It's in Wikipedia. And yet it's verifiably false.
Unbelievable. I tell you what, I really appreciate your work. If people want to buy a copy of your book, Dinesh, where do they go?
Well, the book's in stores everywhere, just Death of a Nation, whereas the movie, you need to go to deathofanationmovie.com. And if you plug in your zip code, boom, it'll tell you where the movie is playing near you. So this is its third week in the theater, so definitely if you haven't seen it, take your friends and family. Please go this week. All
right. The movie by Dinesh D Souza, Death of a Nation. It's in 1,000 theaters. It's going to be somewhere by you. Just plug it in and find it. Dinesh, thanks for being with us. I really appreciate it. Thank you.